Hello there, glad to have you join us again on Channels Beam. I'm Victor Mathias. Now, Nigerians trooped out en masse to vote in those who will represent them in the National Assembly, as well as vote for the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Marred with irregularities, after about 4 days of collating results, the Independent National Electoral Committee declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC as winner of the presidential contest. His closest rivals, however, Atiku Abubakar of the PDP and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, have since vowed to challenge the result in the law courts as they ask their supporters to remain calm. Today on the program, we will be taking a look at how events unfolded, the flaws recorded, as well as successes to be consolidated on. But before we get into all of that, let's first of all take a look at the trends in the past week.
Nigerians trooped out en masse to vote in those who will represent them in the National Assembly, as well as vote for the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Marred with irregularities, after days of collating results, the Independent National Electoral Commission declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC as winner of the presidential contest. His closest rivals, Atiku Abubakar of the PDP and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, have since vowed to challenge the result in the court as they ask their supporters to remain calm. Meanwhile, on the global stage, the day set aside to celebrate women is March the 8th. It is celebrated as a focal point in women's rights movements to issues such as gender equality and violence and abuse against women.
Well, there you go. Those were the trends in the past week. But joining us to look at today's topic, we have in our Abuja studio Michael Oluwagbemi. He's a regarded political analyst with extensive experience in speaking on issues related to Nigeria's socio-political space. He is also the executive partner at Lofty Inc. Group. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure. Nice to have you on this program this afternoon.
Indeed. So what were the trends? What did you see? What were your observations during the elections that concluded last week?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again to your viewers. I think the last concluded election had a lot of firsts. Of course, we all know that for the first time in our nation's history, we probably have four quite competitive parties that had impact on the overall result. Of course, of these four, there were three of them that rose to the top and emerged first, second, and third. There was not much difference between the votes that was gathered by the second and third, which means during the First Republic, this is the first time that the third force is having significant election results wave or sway in their favor, which is the Labour Party of Mr. Peter Obi, the former governor of Anambra State. That is one. The second thing, and I think is quite unique, and most people are not taking note of this, is that this election was the first one that we can say that all the voters that actually got accredited, maybe not necessarily that voted, but at least that got accredited, were confirmed to be living human beings. And this had quite a bit of impact because everybody that got accredited, almost, I believe, about 25 million plus of them, were actually biometrically verified, which is the system which we know as BVAS. This was the first time this is happening. Of course, we recall the days when we used to have a Bill Clinton on the tick on our voters' roll and all of that stuff. And then we introduced the PVC to ensure that we cleaned up the permanent voters card. And then after that, we now introduced a way to confirm that the PVC was actually issued by INEC. This time around, we now had another additional innovation, which ensures that only those who have the PVC tied to that polling unit, the BVAS system is a polling unit-based technology verification system that ensures that the voters, the actual human beings that are tied to that polling unit, are the only one voting from that polling unit, which is quite unique. And this led, of course, to quite a reduction in the number of votes that were garnered in 2019, which was almost about 27 million, versus 2015, which was 29 million plus then. And now we have probably the total number of voters in the last election of about 25 million. Some people have decried this number and said, oh, this number shows that Nigerian people are not interested in election, the turnout is low. I beg to disagree. I think this is the first time that we're actually knowing the number of people that are voting in each of the states, in each of the regions of Nigeria. Why do I say so? The numbers of turnout that we're looking at is not necessarily as low as some of the analysts have made it to be. Why? Because we've been taking the PVC system, the Permanent Voters Registration System, have been around for over 11 years. That's around 2011, 2012. That's when we started compiling the current voters register after the then reforms by President Yar'Adua and Goodluck Jonathan. Now, in those 10 years or so, the average death rate in Nigeria is about 333 per 1,000. That means about a third of Nigerians. A third of adult Nigerians die within that period. And these are the same adult Nigerians that also vote. So if we use that statistics, it means that the 93 million people that is on our voter roll, we can conveniently say about 62 million of them should be alive. And then if we now exclude from that those people who have left the country or who have left their base, then we now talk about resident voters. I believe the resident voters in Nigeria should be about 60 million when you exclude those people who might have passed away, or unfortunately, but that's the death rate in Nigeria over 10 years. About a third of them should have passed away, and those who have moved. That will mean that we got 25 million people to vote out of 60 million. It will mean that we have a very solid turnout rate of 40% plus, which is very, very good for our democracy. Yeah. However, this time around, that 25 million are actually human beings, not any kind of made-up figure. Now, that is one of the unique things about this last election. And the third one, and the last one I want to point out, is that for the first time, the result of an election in Nigeria actually led to a trifurcation along the longitudinal instead of the lateral axis. What do I mean? Normally, elections in Nigeria are usually election results that shows a north and south divide. In Nigeria, this time around, the result of the election shows western win by the APC, a central win by the Labour Party, and an eastern win by the People's Democratic Party. So for the first time, the north-south of the western part of Nigeria voted along similar lines, with actually very narrow losses by APC in Katsina, in Sokoto, in Lagos, and in Osun, despite the fact that they lost those 4 states and they went to the west, but they only lost very narrowly in those 4 states. And then you now have the central, where you have from the south-south to the southeast, even to the middle belt, you have the win by the Labour Party. And then to the east, you have on the northeast, the far north, the far south-south, where you have the People's Democratic Party actually winning in Calabar and in Cross River and in Akwa Ibom, all the way to the north, except in Maiduguri. And now the interesting thing in all of this stuff, in this trifurcation along the longitudinal axis, which I have just explained, is that this is actually a trifurcation along economic lines, not along religious or tribal lines. And this is good for Nigeria. It's good for Nigeria that we begin to vote our pocketbook, because you begin to see that people are actually thinking, because the APC has become a party of the rural areas. APC had favored the rural areas with its agriculture policy, with its transport policy along the Lakaji line. It made sense that the Lakaji corridor population, which is going from Lagos to Kano all the way to Jigawa, favor the APC. And so it's an economic vote, so to say, that has led to the outcome of the results that we have at this particular election. So I think these are very, very 3 unique outcomes, and I think things that we should take note of as we move forward in terms of the analysis of the election results.
Yeah, very well. Let's, like you said, the basis for those votes of the APC, along all of those lines. But let's see how that's going to play out, when the governorship election comes this weekend. But that apart, one of the things that has come to the fore was the process. What's your take on that? I know you made mention of the BVAS, the biometrics and all of that, confirming that indeed all those who voted were living humans, were living beings, but at the same time, there were some hue and cry as regards how results were transmitted and how some people were even disenfranchised. What's your take on that? What did you notice in that regard?
Yeah, I would say there's no human process that is perfect. I think that you cannot let perfection be the enemy of good. By and large, the BVAS brought some sanity, as I've already explained, with a reduction in the total number of voters, which shows that a lot of times in the past we've had ghost voters, so to say, participating in our election. Because our population has increased, and then suddenly now you're having lower number of voters year on year since 2015. It shows that we've been able to weed out all the ghost voters. So the process cannot be perfect. but it can be as perfect as we can. I think the problem you have with the whole issue around collation, transmission, and posting, and I will make the distinction between those three things, is an issue of communication. INEC screwed up the communication, especially the communication as with regards to the intent of the Electoral Act. Let's take the first one when we talk about the collation of results. This is dealt with in Section 62 of the Electoral Act. It talks about the fact that at the polling unit, when your polling officer has already announced the result, he has to sign it, all the agents of the party have to sign it, and they have to post it physically at the polling unit. And then they have to physically take those result sheets, of which duplicates are with each of the party agents, and take it to the ward level for collation, furthermore to the local government level for collation, and furthermore to the state level for collation before it goes through national collation. That's the law of the land. Section 62 of the Electoral Act has nothing to do with transmission, has nothing to do with posting. Now, Section 65 of the same Electoral Act talks about transmission, and it said that transmission will be according to a guideline that is prescribed by INEC. Now, INEC developed a guideline and released it to members of the public, and in Section 28 of that guideline, it provides for two methods of a transmission, a manual method as well as the electronic method. It never in that section made it compulsory that transmission has to be by both or one or the other. It basically said, if you're transmitting by the manual, these are the processes you need to follow. If you're transmitting by electronic, these are the processes you need to follow. That's a simple guideline, and that's what guidelines do. Guidelines do not bind you to go through a particular method. In fact, that guideline envisages a situation where one process serves as a backup for the other process, not that you are using one process to the exclusion of the other. So there's nothing in that thing that says, oh, by the way, you must transmit one way or the other. And by the way, PLAC, which is also a European Union project, also noted in their own report around this guideline, this Section 28 of the guideline, that the INEC has been testing and been using the electronic smart transmission system for the past 3 years. So it is not as if it's a new system. And the system, by the way, they mentioned and they identified that that system is private. So nobody, not the political parties, not the members of the public, have access to the method of transmission of data from the polling unit all the way to the national level electronically. It has always been private. And so that system, as we know it, as far as we are concerned, might have worked. So when I hear people say that, oh, transmission did not work, how did you know? How did you know that the electronic transmission of results did not work? In any case, if electronic did not work, the rules already provide for how you can ensure that manual works, and that manual is also protected. In fact, manual is the backup of all backups, because let us remember that manual, you have given a copy of the electronic of the sheet physically to each of the party agents who signed for the manual. So if anybody has seen a result that have gone all the way to the National Collation Center or the State Collation Center or the local government or the Ward Collation Center that does not match the results that they received at the polling unit, the party agent, about 176,000 plus, NNPP had the highest, APC had the second highest, PDP the third, and I think Labour Party was quite low, about 30,000. If your sheet that your agent physically signed at the polling unit does not correlate with what INEC says they have at the ward level collation or the local government collation, state level collation, and the national level collation, by all means you have a right to protest. And you have a right to also protest the reasoning if they actually cancel them. These are the reasons why you have that particular section, Section 65, as distinct from Section 62. 65 allowing INEC to issue the guidelines, and the guidelines in Section 28 clearly stating and allowing for transmission by manual and or by electronic means, where the electronic means has always been private. Now brings me to the issue of IRF.
Let me quickly butt in there. You know, speaking, Mr. Michael, let me butt in there. You know, speaking about the network being private, and people not being able to know how, if at all, the results were not transmitted or it had issues. I'll take you up on that in just a bit. We need to go on a quick break, and of course, when we come back, we'll continue. Please stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We'll start with us, Michael Oluwagbemi in our Abuja studio, but also joining us is Elvis Akpobi. He's the executive director of the Not Too Young to Lead, as well as Michael Abimboye. He's a senior editor with Oprah News. It's a pleasure to have you both join us on the program. But a lot of water has gone under the bridge, since the program started. But Michael, let me come to you. Let me get your take. We're just speaking about the process of the election before we went on break with Michael Oluwagbemi. But in your own view, in your own analysis, and you're moving around and monitoring, what did you note?
Yes,
everyone.
Michael Abimboye.
Okay. So for me, what I've noticed from the election so far, there have been irregularities with the result sheets. For example, if you notice, there's a particular one trending online currently about a certain lady who signed for all the agents and also signed as the INEC officer herself. I think that's very wrong. Then also, if you notice, the results on the BVAS, on the IREV now, in some states are not what INEC declared. So particularly, I think in Rivers, some are already complaining about the Rivers, particularly OPR government. So these are the issues that INEC needs to address before going to the governorship election. If these are not sorted out, I'm not sure of the credibility of the governorship election. And so, but this also calls for a reason why, if you can have these irregularities online, where agents can find irregular figures, results now, it calls for the question. One has to question the whole electoral process. Should INEC have gone ahead and declare a certain person as a winner when you can figure out simple mistakes? So I think it all boils down to the Supreme Court. When they get to the court, we know how, but the lawyers will know how to argue the matter, then we'll see what we can. But for me, I think with all these irregularities, there's a need for the election to be rerun.
Well, I'm sure the Electoral Act, has its guidelines on how things should be done in case of any of such that you just made mention of. Just before we went on break, also, Michael Oluwagbemi was quoting some sections of the Electoral Act. But I'll come back to you on that again. Michael Oluwagbemi, I haven't forgotten. Let me quickly also hear from Michael Ikpobi, who is also joining us via Zoom from Asaba. Elvis, what was the case or what was the situation in your own case? How did things play?
The previous election, like last Saturday, is a ripoff of democracy, in the sense that what the INEC chairman, the promise he gave about BVAS, the confidence he gave Nigerians about BVAS is not what we saw on that day. And if you tell yourself, despite sometimes we subscribe to sentiments and all that, you tell yourself the bitter truth, Nigerians, they are not happy. The outcome of the result of the elections, Nigerians, and if you observe, there's this silence everywhere. Not because, fine, a particular set of persons, during elections, either you win or you lose. A particular set of persons can be celebrated today, but when you sit down in your own closet, you know that the electoral process, which Nigeria had confidence on, because before I want to take a case study of Oshu State, the entire country was like, okay, I think we're getting closer to what the dream we have for Nigerians. But if you, from what the other Mike talked about, if you recall, not all the results in the polling unit is not the same as that which most centers, coalition centers are announcing. He talked about Obiako local government. I'm still surprised, though they say it's a very large local government. So I'm still surprised those that came from there. It's left for the people there to, decide. Another place is to come out and decide if that was what they really voted and if that result is true. But we can't bend our country into the shape we want immediately. We can't bend the slice of it. I think from what happened last Saturday, power is gradually coming back to the people.
So what would you be expecting moving forward, especially as we have, another election coming in days?
Well, we laid our complaints on Saturday, and I know INEC know that Nigerians are more aware, they are more agitated. There's this yearning for a free and fair elections. There's this anxiety. They already know their loopholes. I think they should work towards where they had lapses in the previous election.
Indeed. Let me hold you there for a bit also and quickly go back to our Abuja studio where Michael Oluwagbemi is standing by. Michael, earlier on you were talking about, the privacy of the network, and how people have jumped the gun, and made assumptions without having knowledge of what actually transpired. But, some would argue, like Michael Abimboye and Elvis just made mention of, how they saw the BVAS malfunctioning. Perhaps that is an on the spot knowledge of what transpired.
Yeah. So I led off my last response by being very clear that we cannot make perfect the enemy of good. And I see when people say, "Oh, the election is not perfect, so therefore there should be a rerun." Then we'll be rerunning forever. The United States had the issue of technology hack, and they accused Russia of interfering in the election the last time, despite the heavy use of technology and the high level of security provided by agencies like the NSA, CIA, and all of the security, and FBI that provide security for, cyber security for the electoral system. We don't even have that. So what is it? Are we saying that unless we have election run perfectly in all the 774 local governments of Nigeria, we're not going to have an election result declared? I think not. I think what you should look at is to see the incremental improvement, the progressive elaboration that Nigeria has gone through. Like I said, for the first time in the history of this country, we can say that every single person that was accredited, I did not say voted, and I'm being very careful with my language, every single person that accredited, because there are now evidences that the accreditation system might have been separated from voting in certain regions of Nigeria where there was intimidation, or where there was actually masked finger thumb printing done on behalf of voters after they were accredited. So I can at least say that every voter that was accredited last Saturday, number one, was real, was existing, and number two, actually was tied to the polling unit where they voted. That is an improvement. And let us also remember that this last Saturday, the national chairman of the ruling party, the sitting president of the ruling party, the director general of the campaign of the ruling party, and the presidential candidate of the ruling party, all four of them lost their states. It was never possible in the history of Nigeria for these four things to happen before in one single election. And then yet, everybody says the election is not free and fair. I will now say, I'll tell everybody that try to understand the law and don't let us try to tar the country. Let's be patriotic. Let's say first thing first is that Nigeria has improved. But we also have to say there's a whole lot of room for improvement. Like I said, this issue of biometric accreditation is one thing, but we also have to think about how do we make sure that actual voters are voting.
Well, let's hope that actual voters will continue to vote. Michael Oluwagbemi, I have to hold you there. We're really out of time. I wish we could go on, but like you said, we should celebrate our successes. But at the same time, I also think that we also need to take a look at how we can address where we've faltered, and so that the process can be as perfect as possible. I mean, it's good you made mention of the United States where they also had issues, but I mean, we're not America, and hopefully we hope that the process will be better, and even the possibility of hacks would be taken away, in as much as we don't have all of the agencies the Americans have, like you made mention. But I have to say thank you to you, Michael Oluwagbemi, Michael Abimboye, as well as Elvis Akpobi, for joining us on the show today and sharing your thoughts on this issue. Thank you again. And that's where we'll wrap it up on the show today. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. Bye for now.